Hi homesteaders, this is Melissa with Gullion Homestead and welcome to my channel where I focus on homesteading skills, self-sufficiency, and resilience. And today I'm showing you my very large collection of peppers from my freezer from last season. And I'm planning on taking these today and making a hot sauce to can up for the next year. So I've shared on here before how I have frozen onions and peppers in my freezer from 2023's gardening season. These onions you see right here are onions we purchased from a local grower. We grew a very small amount of onions last year and basically ate through them throughout the summer. So we had no storage onions. We bought some onions from a local grower and I went to store them, and by December they started to kind of go south, and so Steve and I actually cut all the onions, peeled all the onions, cut all the onions, and put them in the freezer, and they have worked. That's worked out fabulous. So if that does happen to you, you absolutely can still store your onions in the freezer and use them throughout the year. But I'm working on emptying out my freezer because it's April. I'm starting to look at what we're going to be putting in the garden, and I need to get some stuff out of the freezer for room and space to put stuff in this fall. And I know that's going to be kind of a process because I have a vegetable freezer and a meat freezer. My vegetable freezer had a very large amount of a mixture of peppers and jalapenos, anywhere from sweet peppers to a habanero that I had. And my plan all along this winter has been to make a hot sauce, and I just have not gotten around to doing that until today. So today I'm basically taking all of my peppers. I'm throwing in a bunch of garlic and also some onions to get this recipe going. So for exact measurements today, this ended up making me 20 half-pint jars of hot sauce, which is perfect size for Steve and I. There's just two of us in our home, and if I have hot sauce in larger quantities, they actually will most likely go bad. So I like to can my sauces, ketchup, barbecue sauce, either half-pint jars, or I will sometimes do a pint jar like a barbecue sauce because we tend to use a little bit more barbecue sauce than we do hot sauce. But to start this recipe off, what we did is we had 130 ounces of peppers, you guys, in the freezer. That is a lot of peppers. So we started with 130 ounces of peppers. Then I threw 8 ounces of garlic cloves in there, which was like 2 of my small freezer containers. I also freeze my garlic only because I bought garlic from Azure Standard that started to go south on me as well about December or January. So we peeled all the garlic up and froze all the garlic cloves, whole cloves. And whatever I have left over in the freezer this year, by the way, I'm going to take that garlic and make some homemade garlic powder because we've got 70 some garlics in the garden bed right now that's going to be coming out this summer. So we're going to be set with garlic. Anyway, then we put 13 cups of vinegar. So this is a vinegar-based sauce, 13 teaspoons of salt, which ends up being about 1/3 of a cup, if I recall, and 1.5 pounds of chopped onions. So that is what's going into the pot right now. I'm going to just let that kind of boil and then simmer just to soften it up. Remember, all of this stuff is frozen, so it's going to take a little bit longer to soften that up. Here I'm showing you some habaneros I'm throwing in. I think habaneros are the cutest little pepper. I love the way they look. They're just like a little pumpkin, but they've got some kick for sure. Okay, so you can see here my stock pot is plumb full of peppers, onions, and garlic, and that vinegar is the only liquid I have in my pot to cook this down. Okay, let's talk about the health benefits and nutrition of peppers. A lot of people do not think of peppers or hot sauce necessarily being nutritional or have any nutritional benefits to it. most people eat hot sauce because it's good. But honestly, if you think about what's going into this hot sauce, there's no artificial ingredients. Everything is freshly frozen and is good for you. So there's vinegar, there is peppers, onions, and garlic. And then later we're going to add a tomato powder that was made straight out of the garden as well, to give it some rich, thick flavor and to thicken up the sauce a little bit. And we'll talk about that later. But in general, this is a very low carb, low calorie item to add to any meal that you are preparing. Not only is it low in calories, but it also has a high source of vitamin A and C. It's high in potassium, high in folic acid, and high in fiber. So it's just really a fantastic item to have in your pantry for long-term storage. Okay, so I finally got all of my peppers in there. You can see this stock pot is full. Yes, it's very full. This is actually the pot that I do my my water bath canning in. So it's a pretty good sized pot, and I had a lot of peppers, you guys, in my freezer for sure. So the reason I have these peppers was not only to make hot sauce, but I grew some of the peppers, and then I have talked about this before. I purchased peppers from a guy at the farmer's market, a farmer, and he made me a pretty good deal on the peppers. And I just continued to buy them and keep them in my freezer so that I would have them to make salsa over the winter if we needed it, or if we needed it for any type of recipe. And honestly, I used very little of what I had in the freezer. I used more of what I canned pepper-wise. So moving forward, I'm going to can my peppers and use that in place of the frozen peppers. So this is why I have so many peppers in stock. This probably will not happen next year. Okay, so I pulled my peppers and juice after they got nice and soft out of my pan. Okay, I took my peppers and juice out of the pot, stuck it into my food processor, and I wasn't really happy with the way it was processing down, so I ended up putting it into my Ninja blender and blended it all up to get really everything just incorporated into a sauce. So after I blended my peppers, I still had some fibrous parts of the pepper left over, so I strained it here through a fine strainer into a gallon jar. It just makes it easier to handle. And basically just took my spatula and just really tried to move the peppers all around. What's left over is kind of a fibrous part of the pepper that didn't really want to blend down anymore, and which is fine. You can actually use that as a spice. It's still good. You can dehydrate that and make that into a pepper powder to add to other cooking as well. Okay, now we're starting back with a clean stock pot. I'm pouring what was blended down into the stock pot, and I'm just going to cook that and bring that to a boil. Get it nice and hot. Make sure that we've got a good hot sauce that we can actually put into our canning jars. Okay, so here I have some homemade tomato powder from my garden. If you've never used tomato powder or made it, it is fantastic. It actually is what I use as a substitute for tomato paste instead of canning and jarring up tomato paste. We'll share more about how to do this in the fall when the tomatoes come out of the garden, but it is a great way to use your skins up from your tomatoes from canning them instead of tossing them. This is what I did last season. We are down to about a third of a half-gallon jar. I started with a half-gallon of tomato powder for the season, and it's been a fabulous add to my pantry. It is great for long-term storage. And then here what I did is ended up adding 3 cups of tomato powder to thicken that sauce up. I wanted it to be a thicker sauce, and it's still just a little too thin for me. Plus, these peppers were super spicy. So this tomato powder actually kind of brought that spice level down just a touch, in my opinion, and I like spicy food. I thought it was too spicy to use in the cooking. So adding the tomato powder kind of mellowed it out and plus thickened the sauce up as well. Now we have a thick red hot sauce that's just about ready to get in the canning jars and canned up. Okay, now we're going to start the canning process in canning up our hot sauce. So these jars are clean and hot jars that I am pouring my hot sauce into. You can tell the hot sauce is pretty hot. I just used a measuring cup to pour that in. You're going to want to make sure you have a 1/4 inch headspace at the top before placing the lid in the ring. It's really important that your glass that you're pouring your hot liquid into is hot as well, because that temperature change can cause your glass to break and you don't want that. So again, just filling these up, and we will get that in the canner and process it here in a few minutes. Okay, if you've watched my canning videos before, you most likely know, or if you've canned before, that you should wipe the rims with a soaked paper towel that's soaked with vinegar. This helps to get any of the residue off the glass rim so that you get a good seal when you are canning your jars. This is super important. I did not used to do this back in the day, and I would have all kinds of seal failures, and this is the main reason why people have seal failures, is because they either don't do the correct headspace or they don't have a clean rim when they're placing their ring and lid on their jar. Okay, now we have clean rims. Now it's time to put our lids in place. Now, something that I like to do often is I always label my lids, but I sometimes like to label my lids before I put them on the jars. And this is just because I have in the past been canning a lot in the fall, and I either will start to mark it up right after it comes out of the canner, just so I don't get confused on what I've got, especially if I've got a lot of things in red sauce that look familiar. And then the markers really doesn't really go very well on the lid because it's too hot. And then if I wait till it cools, then I forget what I have, and it's just a lot of drama that I just don't like to deal with. So it's kind of a more common practice of mine to actually mark the lids prior to putting them in the canner. It's a Sharpie. Typically, hot water will not remove that unless you have a brisk rubbing of that area to try to get that off. So that's why I do that. So here what I'm doing is I'm finger tight. I put the screw lids on, or the screw rings on. So you have a lid and then a ring that goes in place. You don't want to crank that down really hard. The reason for that is that there is a little bit of air that needs to escape to help with the sealing process, and you could allow for your jars to explode during the canning process. So here I have them in my canner, ready to go. The water is at least an inch. You can do 1 to 3 inches above your tallest jar. These are 1/2 pint jars, so really don't have a ton of water compared to my last canning video. And this, you will, when it comes to a rolling boil, you actually put your lid on and then let this process for 15 minutes. Once the 15 minutes is complete, turn off your heat, leave your lid on, wait another 5 minutes, and then you can remove your jars from your canner and you are processed. Here I'm working on my second batch of jars going into the canner. We ended up with 20 1/2 pint jars, which is fabulous. Will last us probably even 2 years, and I am just so grateful for that because I won't have to do any hot sauce for a while. We hope you've enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. We hope you're having the best day. Bye.